Welcome, family and friends. Today we're going to be talking about the game Thahar. So this is the first episode about the game, so we'll talk about a few things. So the first item that I wanted to show is that I actually finalized the player's handbook copyright, and it's already registered. So I got the registration from the copyright office for it, so it's already taken care of. I did complete the player's handbook finally. Um, just a background, I started on about a little over the year 2000 or so, probably 2002, somewhere around there. Playing with the idea. I've been playing games for quite some time at that point, and role-playing games. That's pen and paper, just to clarify. So started with D&D second edition. That's where I started playing games. And the first character that I made, his name was Alrak, and he was a barbarian. He's a plains rider barbarian. If somebody's geeking out on that, you can check it out. It was really cool. The reason I picked barbarian, I was asked if I wanted to play this game, D&D, and Dungeons and Dragons, and then sounded king. I like dragons. Dungeons sound interesting. And I liked watching a lot of the fantasy, sci-fi movies, stuff like that, especially fantasy movies. And I was familiar with the Conan Barbarian series, which I liked. I was always into that, Conan, Sinbad, the old adventure fantasy movies. So when I got approached, I said, what was it about? They kind of explained in that terms, like it's, kind of like a movie, like those things. And I said, okay, cool. Well, I know what I want to play. I wanted to play Barbarian because of Conan the Barbarian. So I built my character. The first thing I had to do is actually read two books. So the first book was the second edition Player's Handbook, which I still have a copy of. And the second was the Barbarian Handbook, which I still have a copy of that as well. So I had to read both those books before I started. The people I played with were really like into story and character building, which was really cool. I love stories too. I love reading. So I got into that. Took me about a week. Went through character creation, background, different stuff in second edition, and the Barbarian's Handbook. And I picked the Plains Rider because I love the being bound to a mount and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. Love the horses. So that's where I started. But after that, playing, I started thinking about creating a world, stories. I started DMing a little bit here and there, getting more into that. What DMing is being dungeon master or a basically storyteller, driving the story along. So after that, in the early 2000s, I started really dabbling in the idea of story and building mythos behind it, and kind of worked a little bit here and there with it, and slowly started developing. And then I started really getting into more of my faith, and I saw a lack of really focus on faith and role playing. There was a lot of gods and goddesses and stuff like that, but it was really secondary. Some people were into it, some people weren't into it, and it's like, well, I really need to be more of a focused religious experience too, which I'll talk about my religious experience and how that helped me get closer to God later in a different video with my other character. Um, but I wanted to kind of get deeper into that piece of it and how does that work with good versus evil, and really dive deep into story. And then from the story, I started playing, as I'm developing the story, I started playing different systems. And my friend of mine, David, and he's actually my stepson. We were very close. And he's the one who introduced me to the game, and we started really playing and diving deeper into it. And we started kind of workshopping different ideas, and he always had really interesting ideas, and we had really good conversations about theology, about mysticism, philosophy, you name it. We talked all kinds of stuff, and of course, games. Games were a big part of our life at that point. All kinds of different games. So, and we started playing different game systems, and so we played Conan the Barbarian. Was one of them. Earth Dawn, played that. We played a few Cyberpunk uh, stuff, but we always stuck to fantasy. We liked fantasy more than anything else. Um, we played the Middle Earth system, which is on percentile, which we like different styles. We like some things about this system, some things about different systems. Vampire Masquerade, Mage, we played those. So we liked some Werewolf. We played some of those. We liked some aspects. We didn't like some aspects. So we started workshopping, and eventually I started coming up with a game system that I wanted to really develop and kind of get into. And I started playing with the idea of playing with positive and negative numbers. I love math. I was a math geek back then, high school and college. So it's like, well, it would be really interesting to have a negative point system and not just a positive point system, because you can kind of work against each other. So you can take in a positive number and have a negative number and have it subtract from each other and come up to a result that's interesting. And also the negative aspect were certain skills um, would actually point out to you can gear it towards evil, right? So you'll have a positive would be more geared towards a good character, and the negative would be more towards an evil character. For example, the faith stat. And you'd have different power sets depending on where you're at in that system. Ultimately, all characters are beginning to be good characters, but that scale would kind of go either way depending on how um, the world kind of affects them. Then the story kind of progresses. Of course, we played evil characters in D&D and different other systems, and how that translates into the game system didn't really matter as much, um, as long as you're just playing it for fun and just playing it for just to kind of gain levels. And sometimes we min max stuff, and we just kind of grew up and hey, let's just do this, just do it for fun. But we always geared towards like you have to have a character that's willing to do the good for the sake of the story, for the sake of advancing the narrative, as well as it makes more sense to have a cohesion in players when they're all geared towards a good outcome. Because when we played all evil characters in one campaign, it all devolved into anarchy and chaos, and ultimately everybody was on their own journey of selfishness and power, and we never could work together. Maybe for a while, but after a while, it's your character's intention, and it's just to do what they need to do to gain power. So that always kind of derails the story, and you can never have a really coherent story. With a few exceptions, if you have really good story from the beginning, and then you work towards that, and I can talk about those stuff. Like there's really interesting dynamics story for character development and stuff like that. But going back, story always has to trump everything else, right? The narrative means a lot to me. I like story-driven stuff. We like building characters. I mean, we played some characters for years, um, and really be invested in. And I always liked character-driven stories, and character means something. Their emotions, their growth. So it's very helpful to kind of really dive into that. So with those aspects of it, I wanted to create a world that has really good narrative story, as well as a different game system that has the negative positive aspect to it. And that's when we started coming to the building this gaming system and the world. So the gaming system is called Thahar, is called Alnar, and the gaming system is called Thahar. And so that's what that is here. Um, Interesting thing is I just finished the copyright, so I made copyright there. The table of contents, as you can see, there's tons of stuff. It took a lot of work. I'm talking about like almost like 18, 20 years of me going through stuff, thinking about stuff. And this is the introduction of that. So, and I will be publishing, this is my friend, stepson David. this is dedicated to because we did a lot of work together on it. He gave me a lot of good insight on getting that created. And then we talk about the world and history and all that stuff. And one of the things came up is the map, of course, the starting map, and then the Thahar gaming system, and we go from there. So it's very interesting stuff that I'm trying to work on to really flesh out this game system. It took me quite some time, and I wanted to introduce that at this point. Since I completed it and it's copyrighted, I want to start working more on propagating it and moving out to players. I did some play testing with family and friends. I want to do more of that out in the public. So I'm hoping in the next year to starting gaming sessions and maybe even put some videos about the gaming sessions for the game itself. And also part of the channel for gaming is to talk about different stuff that I went through and different games and different characters and different styles. So hopefully you'll join me on the journey with that, so we can work on the different types of games that we can work on together, and hopefully you can create a really beautiful thing and a story that we can make some fun with it, and also gear it towards faith. So faith is very important for me. So that's why I want to incorporate that more into the system. So the faith stat, or the prophet's path in the game is very important, becomes very powerful in the system, and how to thwart evil and really advance the narrative to the world of Anar, which has its own narrative and story, and they'll have some game system mechanics. Another game system mechanic is the advancement, which we'll talk more deeply into. It's more generational, and there's a lot of ins and outs. There'll be expansion to that. I am working on building a guide for the storytellers, which is what we call in D&D Dungeon Masters, to guide them towards the goals and the first supplemental quest or task that the group needs to complete to get to the next phase or advance the story. And we'll give them some guidelines there, so it kind of helps the narrative. But you can also use the system for any world you want to build or work on. It's versatile in that matter, but I wanted to incorporate that into the world, so it's kind of helps kind of flesh it out and make it easier. I'm sure there'll be changes and advancements that will be made, so we can make it better and a little more enjoyable. Every system is going to come up with some kind of a nuance or flaw that seems kind of quirky at times. But I think sticking with it at the beginning to see how it advances and how we can change it to make it a little bit more usable is the important part, and how it doesn't deter from the story is the biggest thing. So I want to make sure that it's not it's comprehensive enough, but it's not driving the story and making it harder to kind of tell the story. So hopefully that will flesh out as we use it and start working on it. So looking forward to people starting enjoying that. I will be updating the website on thahar.com, and there's a subsite called alnar.thahar.com, which is going to have the gaming information, the systems. I'll be publishing some more stuff on there for it, and some information about the player's handbook. And hopefully you can join me on the journey, and we can work together to make it an enjoyable time, and also incorporate faith-based elements into our stories, and work towards the good of Anar and making it better. So again, thank you, and hopefully you will join me on the journey, like I said, and God bless, and thank you, friends and family.